Heyo, wrestling fans.
Heyo.
Heyo, creamers.
Creamer.
It is I, Hot Joe, and welcome back. We're going to talk the turkey like Ted Turner before us.
When you love somebody and you really love them, you never stop loving
We're
them.
going to talk about AEW Dynamite tonight. We're going to talk about my current match count for 2024. Spoiler alert, I watched a buttload of matches. And we're going to talk about some current projects I'm working on for the show that you should be seeing somewhere by this weekend. All that on tonight's episode of And welcome back to Room for Cream, you guys. And as always,
Definitely had a little bit too much coffee.
tonight we've got AEW Dynamite. Let's talk about the card, all right? We've got Chris Jericho versus Kyle Fletcher. I'm going to be honest with you. Chris Jericho used to be my favorite wrestler for like my entire life, but now
In my book, he's nothing but a loser.
and I mean that. We've got Taya Valkyrie versus Deonna Purrazzo with Toni Storm on commentary. Now, I don't know if you guys remember from last week, but Deonna Purrazzo wanted to challenge Toni Storm for the title, and Taya Valkyrie came along and said,
No butts, no cuts, no coconuts.
but, so now we've got Taya Valkyrie versus Deonna Purrazzo, again, with Toni Storm on commentary. That'll probably be one hell of a match. We've got everybody's favorite Hangman.
He clambered back to his old friends and decided to come.
Hangman Adam Page versus Toa Liana from Mogul Embassy, which we've got two Dealer's Choice matches tonight, I should mention. Swerve chooses the opponent for Hangman, and that is who he chose because, you know, it's his stablemate in the Mogul Embassy. And then our boy Hangman, our favorite Hangman, is choosing the opponent for Swerve. And he, on Collision, he said he wasn't going to reveal Swerve's opponent just yet. In fact, he'd have to wait the whole effing show to find out. Now, I don't know if we have figured it out, but it's probably the whole fucking show. Rob Van Dam. We'll see. We've got Jeff Hardy versus Jon Moxley.
You smell like the inside of my mom's purse.
And I guess if you think about it, that's kind of like a bit of a dream match, no? I mean, Jeff Hardy back in the day was known for being like, you know, doing these extreme matches, and Jon Moxley currently is known for doing like a lot of extreme matches in different ways from one another. But hey, man, it might be really good. I don't think it's ever happened before, so I'm looking forward to it. That's all we've got for Dynamite tonight. Unless more, I'm sure more stuff is going to happen that's just not, you know, being advertised yet. But as far as I know, that's all we've got. So Sunday, when I, posted my last video, my match count was at 84 matches, including last week's Dynamite and last week's Royal Rumble. Since Sunday, today's Wednesday, by the way, my match count has gone up to 102 matches of 2024. It's still January, baby. That means in the first 31 days of 2024, the year of our Lord, I have watched 102 wrestling matches. Here are the matches that I've watched since Sunday. I watched Brian Pillman versus Brad Armstrong at WCW Saturday Night. I watched DDP and Cactus Jack versus the Freebirds. I've watched Rick Rude versus some random guy that I do not know and I could not figure out. I watched Z-Man versus Stunning Steve Austin. I watched Z-Man and Johnny Gunn versus Cactus Jack and Barbarian. Then, from the very first episode of WCW Nitro, I watched Liger versus Pillman. I watched Flair versus Sting. Big Bubba Rogers versus Hulk Hogan. From the second episode of WCW Nitro, I watched Sabu versus Alex Wright. VK Wall Street versus Sting for the United States Championship. I watched Scott Norton versus Macho Man Randy Savage. And I watched Hogan versus Luger. Then it was Fall Brawl, the 1995 WCW Fall Brawl with the War Games match. I watched Brian Pillman versus Johnny B. Bad. I watched Sergeant Craig Pittman versus Cobra. I watched DDP versus Renegade for the WCW Television Championship. Or I watched Harlem Heat versus Bunkhouse Buck and Dick Slater for the WCW Tag Team Championships. And I watched the War Games match of Dungeon of Doom versus the Hulkamaniacs, which was Hogan, Luger, Macho Man, and Sting. So, my current match count, which will change later tonight, is 102 matches of 2024. And that's what I'm going to talk about next, is the why would I watch all these WCW matches? Well, when I first started watching wrestling, I was introduced to it by my uncle and my grandfather, and they were WWF fans. It was 1998, I watched WWF. I remember before I was watching wrestling, all the boys in school would bring in their wrestling action figures and talk about wrestling all the time, and it was just like I didn't have cable, so I had no idea what was going on. And then one day, I was at my grandfather's house, and it was Monday Night Raw came on, and him and my uncle watched it every week. And so now I was like seeing what this wrestling thing was all about, and I immediately became obsessed with it. And I remember back in that time period, you would have kids that would have the WWF action figures, and you'd have kids that have the WCW action figures, and that was the only way that I ever really figured out anybody from the WCW, because I did not watch WCW ever. And I remember seeing like Goldberg action figures and being like, isn't that just Stone Cold Steve Austin? Or seeing Sting when he was in the Wolfpack and being like, is that Kane? And so I wasn't a WCW guy. And then I remember my dad would sometimes go to this local video store called Cosmic Videos. I don't think they're open anymore. Maybe they are. I don't know. And he would sometimes he'd randomly come home with a video game, and he'd be like, "Hey guys, I rented this game," and he rented WCW Mayhem, and I played that, and so I sort of knew a couple of WCW guys, and then I got a WCW coloring book for Christmas one year, and I was like, Jericho was in WCW? Because I had no idea. And yeah, so I my exposure to WCW, I've watched all the propaganda that WWF made about it, about how, it turns out WCW actually sucked all along and stuff like that. And so I never thought about going back and watching WCW, and just the other day, for some reason, I decided to, and then I thought, you know what, I should talk about this on the show. So I am going to go back and watch and review all the WCW Nitros and the pay-per-views that each of the Nitro episodes, lead into. So like I said, I've watched the first two Nitros and Fall Brawl 95. So this weekend, I'm going to put out a video where I do a little bit of a review of it. And I also happened to get my greasy mitts on WWF No Mercy for the Nintendo 64 and WCW NWO Revenge, which is a game, both of those games I've never played, because guess what? I did not have an N64 as a kid. So I thought, you know what? Now that I'm going back and doing this, why don't I also play some Nintendo 64, WWF No Mercy, and WCW NWO Revenge for the show as well. So I'm going to also be in the future doing videos about that. You will be seeing the very first time I ever play those games, because I've never played them. I'm aware of the Aki engine, and I understand that it's a pick up and play, thing, and it's like, easy to pick up, hard to master kind of thing, and I'm excited about it. I think I might be a little bit more excited about playing WCW NWO Revenge, because at this point in time I'm on a WCW kick. Like my main exposure to Sting was when he was in TNA, and he was great, but when I'm watching these like Sting matches from '95, I'm like, my God, if I had cable and I was able to watch WCW, Sting would have probably been my favorite wrestler. And just in case you're wondering, well, how did you watch Monday Night Raw, but not Nitro if you didn't have cable? My grandfather would tape every episode of Monday Night Raw, and then we would stop over his house after school on Tuesdays, and I would get the tape from him, and I would go home and watch it. Now, most of what happened on Raw the night before was ruined for me by my classmates, but it was what it was. It was the only way I could watch it. It's funny because I was actually in like the Cub Scouts, and we had troop meetings on Thursdays, and when WWF SmackDown became a thing, and all of a sudden I was able to watch wrestling without having to have cable, I dropped out of the Cub Scouts because I was like, I can't miss SmackDown. It's the only time I could watch wrestling without my friends ruining it for me when I go to school. But that's all the time we've got for today, Creamers. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you're looking forward to these videos that I've got lined up, because I know I sure am. I love you guys. All right? I'll see you in a couple of days.
I'm gonna grab the world of professional wrestling by the balls and do whatever the hell I want.